When I was around 16, my friends and I would often hang out at each other's places, especially after a long week of school. One of my good friends, Mia, lived really close to our high school, and her house was bigger than most. This made it the go-to spot for our little group whenever we wanted to have a sleepover. Her parents worked a lot, so most evenings it was just her and her younger brother, Ben. Our friend Riley would usually join us too. Those nights were always fun, just watching movies, eating snacks, and talking about anything that came to mind. One Friday, we decided to stay over at Mia's place. It was just the four of us: Mia, Riley, Ben, and me. Mia's parents had some work event to go to, so they weren't coming home until late. We didn't think much of it. After all, we'd spent plenty of nights there before. After dinner, we all changed into pajamas and brought our sleeping bags to the living room. Ben got bored and wandered off to his room early, leaving the three of us girls to pick some scary movies. It's kind of funny how, when you're watching something spooky, every noise in the house suddenly feels closer and more intense. But we just laughed it off, tucked under our blankets with bowls of popcorn. At some point during probably the second movie, Mia's house alarm suddenly beeped and started ringing. The alarm wasn't new to us. Sometimes if the wind was strong or a tree branch shifted outside a window, it would let out this sharp beep. Mia got up and turned it off, no big deal. We returned to our movie. Maybe 10 minutes later, the alarm started up again. This time Riley paused the movie, her eyes a bit wider. Did something set it off, she wondered? I shrugged. Their system was supposed to be sensitive to people, not animals. Ben poked his head out of his room, asking if everything was okay, but went right back to bed after Mia told him it was probably nothing. We joked about ghosts for a second, but deep down, I felt a tiny bit of worry start to grow. We walked upstairs to get a better look out of the second-floor windows that faced the back garden. The house was surrounded by trees, and the big backyard was usually peaceful. We didn't see anything out of the ordinary. No animal, no person, not even a stray toy left out on the grass. I stepped out onto the balcony for a little air. The night was quiet, but then another loud ring from the alarm, and the floodlights outside the back porch snapped on. They were bright, shining on the yard and the area around the pool. Suddenly, being out there by myself didn't feel smart. I hurried back inside, heart racing a little bit faster. We decided to turn off all the lights in the house, hoping maybe whatever was outside would just move along. The living room, which always felt so cozy before, now seemed a lot bigger and filled with shadows. We gathered up our things and tiptoed downstairs to the kitchen, staying away from the windows as best we could. None of us thought to grab our phones. I'm still not sure why. Maybe because we were nervous and not thinking clearly. Ben had started to wake up again, looking worried. Mia tried to calm him, whispering that everything was fine, but I could tell she was nervous too. Then the alarm blared for a third time. This time Ben yelped, and Mia took him with her upstairs, probably to keep him away from the noise. That left Riley and me in the kitchen. That's when we heard them. Footsteps outside, crunching leaves echoing around the side of the house. The steps were quick and sure, no hesitation. Riley and I both froze, listening. When the steps moved past the door and a shadow cut across the window, my breath caught. Someone was definitely outside. I remember the shape of a head and shoulders, only clear because another security light flicked on, lighting up part of the yard and reflecting off the glass. We waited, not daring to move. I grabbed Riley's hand, and for a while we said nothing, too scared even to whisper. The shadow moved from the window toward the back door. That door had vertical blinds, but they weren't closed all the way. The person on the other side had a flashlight, shining it in and sweeping it across the room. For a moment, the light landed directly on us. Neither of us moved.
My mind was racing, but my body refused to budge. We just stood there, holding our breath. Somewhere upstairs, I heard Mia's voice in a low tone, probably trying to keep Ben calm, but downstairs, the tension kept building. Suddenly, there was a loud thud at the front entrance. It sounded like someone trying the door. Riley squeezed my hand so tightly, it hurt. I don't know what came over me, but I crawled over to the back door and pulled the blinds fully shut. Then I grabbed the door handle with both hands and pressed it closed, just in case. The minutes felt long. Every few seconds, another loud bang rattled the front door. I stayed at the back door, holding the handle as tightly as I could. Riley was still frozen, staring into the darkness of the kitchen. Outside, the person kept knocking or banging on the glass, as if testing the door to see how strong it was. For a few moments, it seemed like the noise outside was all around us, the banging at the front, the rattling at the back, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel path. Then, as suddenly as it started, it all stopped. I waited, holding my breath. The security lights flickered off, and the only sound was the hum of the fridge. That night, none of us slept. Mia and Ben stayed upstairs, while Riley and me dozed in the kitchen, waking up at every small noise. When morning finally came, everything looked normal. The sun shining in, birds chirping, as if nothing had happened. Mia's parents returned home a couple of hours later. We told them what had happened. They were upset, mostly because none of us had called for help. Looking back, I understand why they were mad, but at the time, I just felt embarrassed. Her dad walked around the house with us, noticing muddy marks by the doors and scattered footprints along the side yard. He called the police, who checked out the property. They agreed that someone, or maybe more than one person, had been circling the house, probably looking for a way in. They said the area had seen a few break-ins lately, with people going around trying to figure out which homes were empty. Police guessed that the strangers might have left when they realized the house was occupied. But what I can't stop thinking about is how, once they saw someone inside, instead of leaving, things actually seemed to get more intense. After that night, I never stayed over at Mia's place again. I couldn't feel comfortable there, knowing what had happened. Riley felt the same, though we never really talked about it in detail afterwards. Mia, I think, was frustrated with us for a while, but she hadn't seen the people up close like we had. Over time, the details faded, but the way I felt that night never really left me. I know it might sound strange, but sleepovers never felt quite the same after that night. Even now, when I hear a strange noise at a friend's house, my heart beats a little bit faster. Looking back, I realize how lucky we were that nothing worse happened. I'm a lot more careful about locking doors and checking alarms now. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, don't hesitate to call for help, and always trust your instincts. Sometimes, what seems like a simple night with friends can turn into something you'll remember for the rest of your life.
A few years ago, when I worked in finance in a big city, I met a lot of people through my job. Office happy hours were a regular thing. One year, we welcomed a new guy, let's call him Adrian, to our team. Adrian was a talker, always laughing, cracking jokes, and telling wild stories about all the people he'd met and places he'd been. At first, everyone loved being around him. He was great at keeping the mood light. Soon, we started hanging out outside of work, grabbing a drink or just unwinding on the weekends. But as I got to know Adrian better, I started doubting some of his stories. He talked about these unbelievable adventures and celebrity hangouts, but something didn't add up. Still, he was easy to get along with, so we all let it slide. One day, Adrian invited me and a few others to his family's condo on the coast in Florida for a little beach getaway. He said his sister would be there, and his mom owned properties in all kinds of fancy places. He made it sound like it would be a fun, relaxed weekend, and I thought, why not? I brought my younger brother along for the trip too. We met at the airport and flew down together. Adrian's sister was waiting for us when we landed. She was friendly but had an awkward vibe, just a little hard to read. The condo itself was surprisingly nice, 3 bedrooms and a balcony with an ocean view. We settled in, splitting up the rooms, Adrian in one, his sister in another, and my brother, Evan, and I shared the third. Since we'd arrived late, there was no time for the beach, so we hit a few local bars instead. The crowd was mostly older, but we didn't mind. Adrian, however, started drinking way too fast. For the first time, I saw a different side of him. Quick-tempered, loud, and way too aggressive with strangers. He made people uncomfortable, especially when he approached women at the bar. At first, Evan and I found it kind of ridiculous, but it quickly got awkward. At one point, Adrian got into a shouting match with a bigger guy, and I had to step in to calm things down. When we tried to break it up, Adrian turned on me, swearing and storming off. His sister trailed after him, not saying a word. Evan and I stayed behind to finish our drinks. A couple of girls came up, making jokes about Adrian's scene earlier. We laughed it off and ended up getting their numbers, planning to meet again later. When we got back to the condo, Adrian's mood had flipped. He was suddenly energetic and happy, wanting to party again. But after we mentioned we'd met some other people, his energy disappeared, and he quickly stomped off to his room, slamming the door. I thought things might settle down by the next day. As night came, Evan and I tried to relax, but Adrian stayed locked in his room. Messages started popping up on my phone, texts from Adrian, getting angrier with each one, accusing me of abandoning him, threatening to toss our stuff out. We decided to cut the party short and headed back. Adrian was in the living room, staring at the wall. He barely answered when I checked on him, then retreated to his room. Evan and I agreed we'd figure it out in the morning. We were talking quietly in our room when we heard footsteps in the hallway. The sound stopped right outside our door. We whispered to each other, realizing Adrian was probably listening. 5 whole minutes went by before the footsteps faded. Then we heard Adrian's voice. He was laughing and talking to himself in the dark, saying things about us that made no sense. I peeked into the dim living room and saw him in the corner, leaning against the wall, muttering and laughing to himself. At that moment, I knew we had to leave the next morning. We tried to sleep, but the rest of the night was filled with more pacing and strange noises. Just as I was dozing off, something woke me. I sat up and saw Adrian standing in the doorway, staring at me. I barely managed to ask what he was doing before he ran at me, yelling and trying to grab me. Evan had to pull him away and push him into the corner of the room. Adrian kept screaming nonsense and threats, blaming us for everything. There was no way we were going to stay another minute. We packed our bags in silence and called a cab to a nearby hotel. The rest of the weekend, we just kept to ourselves. Back at work, Adrian avoided me and Evan. Not long after, he switched to another office, and we never really spoke again. The whole thing left me shaken. It was nothing like the harmless sleepovers or parties I was used to. Sometimes real life can be more unsettling than any scary story you watch in a movie. I still think about that weekend whenever someone invites me on a trip or to stay at a friend's place. It's a good reminder that you never fully know someone until you do.
When I was around 8, my sister, a few years older than me, and I lived with our mom in a small old house. It was just the 3 of us after my parents split. The place was cramped, but we made the best of it and shared a tiny bedroom. The backyard was our favorite spot, big enough for an above-ground pool and a wooden deck surrounded by a tall fence that made us feel safe. Back then, I was a curious kid. I'd climb high on the fence just to peek over and talk to the neighbor boys who lived diagonal to our house.
Their uncle, who often worked in their yard, would chat with us too. He seemed normal, friendly enough, so we never thought twice about it. One day, he tossed a basketball over the fence, and instead of letting us toss it back, he vaulted right over and grabbed it himself. It didn't feel unusual at the time, but looking back, it was a little strange how comfortable and skilled he was with our fence. Not long after, as the three of us were talking by the fence, my sister casually mentioned our mom's work schedule, that she was often gone at night, leaving just us kids at home. I didn't think much of it, and for a while, nothing changed. One night, I woke up to my sister crying and talking quietly on the phone. She told me everything was fine and to go back to sleep. I did. I was a heavy sleeper and didn't question it. The real story came out the next morning. It turned out that while I slept, our neighbor's uncle tried to break into our house. He banged on my sister's bedroom window, yelling for her to let him in. When she refused, he circled the house, pounding on every door and window, trying desperately to get inside. Terrified, she called the police. By the time they arrived, he'd slipped back over the fence and disappeared into his yard, giving the officers nothing to go on when they came knocking. After that night, Mom made sure we spent nights at our dad's house as often as possible, but her work schedule couldn't always be changed. Still, over time, things felt normal again, and the backyard didn't seem as scary. A few years passed without any issues. One evening, my sister had a group of her friends over for a sleepover. The girls set up in the living room, playing board games near the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. That door had vertical blinds, but one was broken, so there was a small gap you couldn't really cover up. As they were playing, one of Sister's friends suddenly went quiet and whispered, "Don't freak out, but there's someone at the door." When they all turned to look, there he was, our old neighbor's uncle, staring through the gap in the blinds, his face pressed against the glass. Everyone panicked. They called 911 right away. Again, he leapt the fence before anyone could get there. The police showed up quickly, and even though the girls clearly described what the man looked like and noted what he was wearing, there just wasn't enough evidence. He simply denied everything. That was the final straw for our family. We packed up and left the house behind, getting a restraining order against the neighbor's uncle. He didn't bother showing up to court, so the order was granted automatically. We never saw him again after that. Years later, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked him up online. Last I checked, he was in prison for completely different crimes. Thinking back, I never realized how much danger we were in because I slept through most of it. My sister, though, she still remembers every single detail. It's one of those stories that start off so normal, but the memory lingers long after the fear fades. Sometimes the scariest part of a sleepover isn't a scary movie or ghost story. It's real life, and you never see it coming.